our ordering process, so it'll come probably in 45 minutes. The sponsor, Babardu, I think is the name of the company. They I didn't tell him exactly how to order it or whatever. So he thought I was ordering, and I thought he was ordering. Oops. But we'll get it. Don't worry. It'll just be later.
So where are you going to sit?
Okay, great. Okay, so this is MadJS. Thank you for coming. Today we'll be having a presenter talking about Exis, a product. I think it's local medicine product. So we look forward to hearing about that. Briefly mentioned, we do have a website for MadJS, currently down. Check on that. On that site, you'll find our code of conduct and links to past meetups. You'll also find links to the YouTube recordings that we are doing. Hani has been doing it for over 2 years now. They're really useful, valuable resource if you can make it. You can go check them out, or if you forget, if you wanted to hear something again, it's also useful there. Of course, we also have been doing the Node School events probably every other month. Last month we did Node School event instead of the presentation meetup. Those aren't recorded, of course, but we will be doing one next month. We haven't probably figured out what we're doing yet. We also don't know if it'll be Monday or some other day. We'll figure that out.
Send notes to everybody.
Yep. But those are a very valuable resource in my opinion. You can learn various aspects of JavaScript or Node or general web technologies. There are people who you can ask questions from. There are people who can be your mentor or whatever. Or if you want to be a mentor, you can do that too. So I recommend it. Otherwise, come to these meetups because you can learn stuff too. Next month, we tentatively have a presenter talking about Webpack. I will make sure that he gets his information in, and then we can get the scheduling going. So Overdue is the company that's hosting. He's ordering pizza, so I'll let him come in when he's ready to talk about it in a second. But in the meantime, if there are any announcements or job openings or cool web technologies or things that you want to mention, go ahead.
Yes, I can talk on part of Bauer, dude. I work there.
Oh, perfect. Great.
Yeah, he might have more. Scott might have more to say, but we are a company that deals with the lead generation and lead distribution industry, and we're looking for developers and system admins. We mainly do PHP development. We also do some JavaScript development. JavaScript is obviously the front end for a lot of stuff, and our website there is not a prime example. That's basically our sales website, but we have a much bigger system for current customers, and we have a lot of new projects in the pipeline that require JavaScript, and we've also started moving everything into Amazon, and our Amazon stuff is more heavily dependent on JavaScript, but we also we use Node for a good portion of the Amazon stuff, and we also are looking for any kind of general web developers, and anyone who's interested, you know, let us know after the presentation. Or we also have a website and some flyers in that if any of you guys want to, or anyone's interested, or you know anyone's interested. But yeah, that's pretty much our pitch. It's just downtown. It's on the other side of the square, but it's a pretty good place to work if anyone wants to work there.
How many people do you have working with you?
So we have in our office 9 people right now, but we are looking for more. And we also have offices in Chicago and Slovakia and Hungary. So yeah, it's not our office it started as a sales office, but we've now started hiring developers. I was the first developer we hired in the Madison office, but there's now a few more. And it's, yeah, even though Scott's not in the room, he's my boss, but it's a pretty good place to work if anyone's interested in web development. And I guess especially we've been moving more and more toward our cloud is the Amazon cloud that we've kind of accepted and gone into, but if anyone's interested in that kind of stuff, you can talk after the presentation or whatever. So.
You don't have to know Hungarian, do you?
No, I don't. I just last week hired a Hungarian guy, but he spoke good English, so actually we're also looking for iOS developers and Android developers if anyone is looking in that direction, but mainly we're looking for web developers.
Cool. We'll thank Belguru for the pizza too.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other announcements? Yes.
I have one announcement. My friend Stephen Anderson of Bendy Works asked me to mention that there's a Madison Ember.js meetup group. So just go to the meetup.com and search for Madison Ember.js. I think that's the name of the meetup group. So it's they just started recently. Not sure how many meetups they've had so far. So
We've had 2. We've had 2 meetings so far.
2 meetings? Okay. Thank you. Were you going to talk about it, or did you send somebody?
No, it's weird that Steve didn't tell me, but
Okay. Well, he asked me, and I said, "Well, give me some links and some information." Didn't hear from him anymore, so he must be
everywhere
busy.
we're above Madison's. I don't know when the next one is. I think we have a work day coming up too.
You guys are on meetup.com, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Any other interesting events, job openings? Yeah, go ahead.
If there are any other students here who go to UW-Madison, I work as like a research assistant in the CS department. But really, what I do is work on an Angular app. But I'm graduating, so if someone is interested in taking over my job,
What does your job entail?
So I actually I work with the same group that Nick actually worked with before he jumped on board with Exis. But so I work with Professor Suman Banerjee in the like networking and mobile networks group. I'm not too good with networks, but I'm pretty okay with Angular. So that's kind of what I do. I'm working on a research project now called Pairdrop, and so some of the stuff I have to do is like write a front end that interfaces with our back end that basically works with our in-house, like our like proprietary smart routers. So like you can configure a lot of stuff with your router over the internet. I'm also working on an app that an Angular app that will function in the absence of internet. For example, if your internet goes down, we still want to do stuff with your router.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Mark. I'm the lead developer at Murphy here. Probably like lead developer, I'm also sort of hiring for a system admin type person. Because I'm tired of trying to maintain my machines. Most of our front end we're moving to is all Ember.js. Our back end is pretty much all Node, running on Google Cloud Services, so mostly some Google Compute Engine stuff. We have a legacy Rails application that I'm trying to turn off and turn into a Node-backed Ember application, but just doesn't have time for it. And I also can't stay very long with this, so I apologize for making it but we are hiring, hopefully soon.
What are you looking for?
Sort of full stack. I mean, so ideally, someone that's comfortable with Ember or sort of willing to become comfortable with Ember, sort of significant degree of knowledge about high performance and knowledge is also useful. And we also do a lot of like media transcoding work, and we have a custom deduplicating stores service that we are using and building out right now. That's also another project. So, I mean, pretty much anything as far as what we're looking for. So, if you sort of specialize front end versus back end, I can work around that. Right now, I do a lot of things. So, now I can do fewer of the things.
How many programmers are you looking for?
That is yet to be determined. So right now our team is rather small, and I'm trying to reverse that trend. So feel free to like mark with a C after a few parts. This has to be shortly. I'll stop talking.
Scott, did you want to mention anything more than?
Pizza's on the way.
All right.
Sorry, guys.
It was just a miscommunication issue. Any other comments or events or announcements? People looking for jobs, look up with people who are hiring. All right, and I think we can go on.
Yeah, excellent. All right, so hey, I'm Nick Hyatt. I'm the lead JavaScript engineer at Exis. We're pretty small, so we kind of just make up our titles. So the goal of Exis here is seriously to simplify app development. And I'm just kind of going to walk you through what we are and a little bit about how it works. It's kind of well, you'll see as I go, hopefully. So I'll start with the basics of who and what. So who we're a mix of current and former UW-Madison students and alumni, including undergraduates, master's students, and PhD candidates. I'm currently part-time pursuing my master's, more or less. I just graduated with my undergrad a little over a year ago, and our CEO left his PhD program to start this company. So we're right here in Madison, based in Madison. Our office is on the 10th floor of that building right there where that guy's walking. The 30 West Mifflin there above the generator. Yeah, it's a great view. We have the corner too, so we can see the Capitol. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, we like Madison. We love Madison. We were born out of a research project we were was working on with Leo, and we kind of spawned out of some of the ideas we found there. And we think Madison is a great developer community, and we're just hoping to add to it. We officially started working on this project last August. And like I said, our goal is just kind of to simplify app development. So what it is, Exis is an open source backend as a service platform. We attempt to remove some of the complexities developers face when creating modern applications. So yeah, it's a lot of jargon, right? So like, what's that supposed to mean? We bundled up basically a variety of services that we think solve a number of common problems that developers face when trying to get an application up and running quickly. And the services, they're all connected to each other through what we call a fabric, which is basically just a WebSocket-based networking layer. So you can kind of think of it as, it's like a mix of Heroku and Firebase and like Socket.io all combined into one monstrosity. So the overview here is that fabric meshy logo, our logo in the middle is our network fabric messaging bus. And you have your front end applications, and then you have our services that we run in the back. We have storage, user authentication, registration, and backend hosting. If you want to run a Node.js backend, we'll run it in a Docker container and Amazon services for you, essentially. Or you can run it yourself if you want to go on Amazon and figure out how all that stuff works. And the Node also in the center is an open source based on the WAMP protocol, which is a WebSocket protocol that allows for 2 different messaging patterns. So we use WebSockets to get bidirectional communication, and we use 2 messaging patterns which WAMP provides, which is publish and subscribe. So a one-to-many relationship. You have publishers and many subscribers, in RPC style. One-to-one function calls from one device remotely to another. And currently we support Swift, Python, JavaScript, which includes, I wrote an AngularJS wrapper, Node.js, and Ionic, mostly because their framework is based on Angular. So what's different than just like a normal WebSocket connection? Well, we provide authentication and fine-grained permissions based on your sessions, and we do, when you register or subscribe a function, we can take the expected types that function wants and make sure that it's only called if it's getting the right, that the JSON matches the type of data it expects. So this can be a little bit tricky to understand, so I'll kind of show you. This is a little demo I built for our website, which actually runs some code, so I don't know if I can zoom in a little to get it. But, so this is an example of like the publish-subscribe methodology. So here you have, on the right is like your backend, which is going to subscribe this. So there's a function it's a little hard to read. So it's subscribing this function here as a handler for any events that are called on this channel, I want strings. And it's this function, we use our client-side library SDK is called riffle. We use this riffle.want function to say this function only accepts a string. And over here, our backend can publish a string to I want strings, and then if it's successful, it logs that it published. So we run the backend, we can see that it built, and we run over here, and we can see that on the right side, we got the string, on the left side, we got the publish. If I change this to an int rather than a string, or float, and I run this, on the left side, you'll still see it won't log an error on the left side for a publish because it's hard to say when you have many subscribers that if one of them wants something different than the other ones that you should get an error back as a publisher. If it was a register call situation, you'd get an error on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, you don't get the message, though, so your function's never called. You don't have to worry if you don't have to check type to say, was the input int? If it's not, my backend's going to crash and throw an exception or something. And the same thing for register and call. So this is you could have many subscribers. You can only have one thing register, and then things can call it one at a time. So over here, you see the same thing. Build's complete. This calls with a string. This time, if I change this to an int and call it, I will get the error on the client side too, because the relationship there is such that it's pretty easy to see. And the type safety, yeah, that's just kind of what I was showing you. So that's like the basics of what our system kind of looks like as far as that's the messaging style, and then and those work. So everything, each one of those components you saw, we register basically on our Fabric using domains. So we are the top level domain Exis. If you register on our website for a free account, you become exis.dev or whatever your username. I'm exis.nick2 because Nick was taken. If you have an application, the exis.dev.app1, users would be users of that, and so down. And ownership goes down this chain. So as long as you're above any place, you can call down into anything you want. And so function calls on these look like over here when I said I want strings, I register. If I was registering that, it'd be exis.nick/I want strings. And only Exis could call it because it's above. And if anything was below me, I'd have to give it explicit permission to call that function. So that's how we do checking of authorization to see everyone has the right permissions to call the functions they're intending to call. And so everything that connects to our Fabric is identified by one of these domains. So the core services I was talking about is we have a core service that's MongoDB storage that you can attach to any of your applications. We have we call them all appliances. So we have storage appliance, which is a MongoDB wrapper essentially, but it's done over WAMP. So I wrote a library that you call find one, or all the functions you'd expect on your collection. User registration and authentication. We have an auth appliance that allows you to easily register and create users with passwords and emails, and they can log into the system so they can connect to your application. We'll launch backend containers via Docker. We have some base images that support, so you can just write code in Node.js, make a package.json, and we'll import the libraries and run it in a container for you, and you don't have to worry about it. We have that for Node.js, for Python, and Swift. We have an Amazon S3 based file, an image hosting service, which I'll kind of show you in my little demo in a minute, that allows you to upload images or files from your app easily and not worry about it and retrieve them later. It allows users to upload them if you give them permission. And we have a replay appliance, which essentially you can set up to listen to certain channels for publishes, and then it will store the messages it sees in a database, and you can query them later when you want to see what was in there. If you're offline and you missed stuff and you want to come back and see what you missed, you can find it in there later. So why did we do this? Well, basically because we thought it was cool, and we're a bunch of developers who like to do cool stuff. So we were working on another project. We needed to solve a problem over there, and we found this WAMP protocol and started building stuff around it, and then we just realized, like, oh, I think we could generalize this. And so since last August, we've just been geeking out working on it. Like I said, we were working on a different project. So we think that connecting front-end and back-end components via, we think bidirectional communication is awesome, and cutting through a lot of the boilerplate code by authenticating these things, so you don't have to, like, pass around tokens and stuff. You just know who a person is by their session that we authenticate, and you can call them from your backend as well. You can find them wherever they are, and then you couple that with validation, and we think you can drastically reduce, like, boilerplate code. So you don't have to write you write your function that looks like a function, and you don't have to do a bunch of validation, a bunch of checking with your database to make sure this token is authorized to do this function. It's just kind of all built in. And ideally, we think less code means less time spent writing it, hopefully, and less places for bugs and vulnerabilities. So what's next? You can check us out on GitHub. Exis-io is where you'll find all our repos. Pretty much everything is open source, but we're in the midst of repackaging everything into open source, including all those. The only things that weren't are some of those services I was telling you about, but we're repackaging them up, and we're going to try to make a little toolkit that allows you to easily launch it in Amazon if you want, or I don't know if we'll be able to get it onto Heroku or something. But if you want to launch it or run it locally yourself, you have to have Docker, but we're going to package it up so that you can do that. In the meantime, you can register for a free account at Exis.io, host an app for free as well. We're in beta, so we're not charging anything. So you can just build on there, and it's pretty easy, and you'll find, like, tutorials and documentation. And we're kind of transitioning away from working on Exis full-time, but we've enjoyed building it a lot, and we think it's cool, and we hope others feel the same way and continue to adapt and polish it as an open source project. So, that's me and Nick Hyatt again. I'll walk you through a little demo app I made, and I'll show you a little bit of the code of what it actually looks like. So this is our website. This is what it looks like if you're logged in. This is me here. You can go to your dashboard and see a list of your applications, create them here. So the one I'll demo tonight is this chat application. In here, you could delete the app. I'm not going to because I'm going to show it to you. You get our appliances. That's those services I was talking about. So for this app, I attached the auth appliance, which is really all it needs. I attached a container appliance too, because I'm going to just, like, throw in a little Node.js backend to show you how that runs. And I'm not going to use storage or replay for this. It's just a simple chat app, and basically it shows, like, how you can make a really easy chat app without having to do much of anything at all. So I guess I'll demo the application and then I'll walk you through the code a little bit. It's pretty simple, but this is, refresh this to make sure my connection wasn't broken, but yeah, so this is a little chat app. It's written, it's actually in Ionic, but they use AngularJS, so it's Ionic, but it's basically AngularJS. So it's just a little chat app. You can see, yeah, what you'd expect from a chat app. And basically, this is the lines of code you get for it. So, I was saying over here, this this riffle, $riffle, this is an Angular service. I don't know how many people are familiar with Angular. In Node.js, it's just called riffle. Angular names everything with a $, it seems like. So this riffle service is a module I created that wraps just our vanilla JS browser package, and that has all our core features. So in this one, I attached the file storage I was talking about for image uploading. I set a little % variable to notify because it allows you to send photos. Made a little messages array, which is going to contain the messages you'll see on the screen. And then with the auth service that I had attached, I showed you on the website, you just call riffle.login. We have two settings. You can allow people to log in anonymously if you don't want them to have a username or password, or you can set the auth appliance up when you create it so that it requires them to register with a name, email, username, password. In this instance, I just did anonymous login. This is the publish subscribe thing I was talking about. So riffle is the domain of the riffle is the domain of my app. So this riffle represents exis.nick2.chat is the name of my app. So I'm subscribing a function called Exis chat on that domain, and the handler for that is this got_message function here, which is just going to receive a message. Which is a message object. It sets it received to true so that it knows whether it's its own or whether it was received, and calls my display message function, which just basically pushes it to the array, and the HTML kind of handles the rest. This is the publish. So when you click send on that little button, you create a little object that's your username and the message you sent from the input box. You publish it to the same channel that someone else is listening on, publish the object, and it's as easy as that. They get it. And then you display it yourself without the message received being true so that it shows up on the correct side. And the other service, and that's pretty much, I mean, that's the logistics of pretty much the entirety of the app, which, I don't know, I think is pretty simple for a chat app. The other thing I attached to this one that I like that was kind of cool, and that I think is cool about Ionic too, is that you can run the app on your phone. So I installed this one on my phone too, and then I installed that, or I attached the file storage. So you can take, we use S3 like I said for the file hosting, so you can take an image, we'll upload the image to S3, and then we'll publish it, and it'll come up across there. And the same thing here if I want to grab a image off my file system, I can grab it and publish it. And the difference there is a little extra code, but basically it's this upload file function. The fs variable was that reference to the file storage API that I created, and we have documentation on our website if you want to see all the functions. And basically I upload the user file, make a message object out of it, and then go through the same process as above, just attaching. I use this send image function up here, which attaches the URL and the username, and then it knows if it's a URL, it's going to display the message as an image. And I don't know, that's so that's one of the pretty easy. There's really no backend involved. You can send images, send messages. If you attach this replay thing, you could get a history of all, and you told to listen on that channel, you could get a history of all the messages you'd seen. And that's kind of the idea we went with here is making this kind of WAMP networking layer and attaching this peripheral services around it to try to make more simpler app development. And I would definitely say our most full-featured libraries are our JavaScript libraries, which I documented in here if you want to see. So JS Riffle is our vanilla JavaScript. This is what you'll see and run on Node.js if you want to mess around with making a backend using this and registering functions. Rather than doing HTTP, you could literally register a set of functions for your API and using this. And we do. This whole site is built on our system. And then ngRiffle is the other kind of JavaScript library that wraps that if you're working in Angular or Ionic. And I guess the one last thing I was going to quick show was, so this is a little Node.js backend. It's all it does is register one, or it subscribes on that same chat channel that everyone was listening on, and it just logs the username and the message it heard. And so I was going to simply, let's see, where was I? So in my chat app, I'd already attached the container appliance, which is where you can host your custom backends. So you kind of come in here. These are all my repos. There's way too many of them. But you pick a repo out of here that has, we give you a file format. We have 3 base images. You basically just name the image, whether it's Node.js you want, Python, Swift, and then the start file you want to run. And you build an image based off that. I already actually built an image. And so an image is, the base. And then, I don't know how many people are familiar with Docker. And then you run a container based off of that image. So containers are like instances of the process running over again. So in this case, you can add some environment variables if you need. I don't. I'll just make it called logger. I'll create the container. It's all done. I get my logger container up here. I can start it. It's started. And so now I should be able to send some messages. And if I look in the logs, yeah, I should have seen those messages. And it'll just, you can obviously imagine a more complex backend, but that's just a simple demonstration of running how you can make a more complex system. So, yeah, I guess that's the basics of my presentation, what I wanted to show. I don't know, I've had a lot of fun making this, and I think it's pretty cool, and it has potential. It definitely needs some polish and work to make it a little easier for devs to use, but I'd be interested in hearing people's questions or thoughts or ideas. So, thanks for letting me present, too. I really appreciate it.
Can you talk a little bit more about the WAMP protocol?
Yeah, so...
Interject on that as well, about the RPC.
Yeah. Okay, so the WAMP protocol is... so it's built on WebSockets, and what it is it's I can maybe find a graph here, but you can imagine so what you need is you have a centralized node, right? And you call it like a broker, and rather than collect, so like in a normal WebSocket, if you want to collect 2 clients, you want one to send a message RPC to the other, you might say like just link them up, connect them. But instead we put this node broker in the middle, and everybody connects via their WebSockets, and it keeps state about where everyone else lives. And the domains, which we use to register everything, that's how it keeps knowledge of where something is. So you actually aren't quite connecting directly to another client, you go through a broker. So when you make your RPC call, you'll go to the node will say, oh yes, someone registered under this domain that you're making the call on, and they live over here, and it redirects your message over there. If they're not connected, it throws you an error saying, couldn't find it, no one is registered with that function. And the node supports 2 messaging patterns, which is why it's, I can't think of the acronym WAMP stands for anymore, but the 2 messaging patterns are the RPC, so it's the one-to-one, where you register a function that can only be registered once. If someone tries to re-register it, they'll get an error saying somebody already exists with that registration, and then you can call, that's what you would probably use for like your backend. So your backend registers one function, and all your clients can call it. And then the publish subscribe. So you want a one-to-many relationship. So perfect if you have a chat room full of 50 people. You just have the client. You don't even have to worry about a backend. Send a publish to the node. It remembers everyone who subscribed, and it sends the messages out to everyone. And it is an open source protocol.
Is it on GitHub?
Yeah, I think this is it here. So it's the Web Application Messaging Protocol. It's an open standard WebSocket. Yeah, we forked some. They have some nodes that they run, and we forked the version of their node that uses Go, like Go programming language, and then we went with that because it was the cleanest implementation. And we kind of we forked their repo and then continued to build for more of what we were doing, because it doesn't quite exactly. They don't have like the authentication stuff in. You can register on anyone can register on any domain on our system. You have to have permission, a certificate, in order to register on the domain. And so we forked it and modified it a little bit, but it's based on this standard.
What does IO stand for? I've never seen that suffix in a URL.
Indian Ocean.
Is it Indian Ocean? Okay, there you go. I actually don't know. It stands for cool startup who couldn't get a .com.
So your demonstration is peer-to-peer communication, but obviously, as you mentioned, you have a proxy or what was it?
Yeah, you can call it broker, I guess.
Broker,
the node in the middle,
broker. So how do you prove that your client is your client? How do you log in?
So what we do is when you try to connect to the node via WebSockets, so you go to websocket : node.exis.io, and then you connect briefly to like a area where you basically get nothing, and in that time we send you a challenge, and
By email?
No. By function call. So we pass you a challenge. We say, like, you need to respond to us with this challenge. Your challenge is a session token, kind of like you would expect. And if you look on our website, I think, so if you want to connect, we have this mechanism for token management. So if you want to connect some other thing, you just create a random key for it. I put copy to clipboard because if you want to see what the token looks like, it's like a big, nasty, long token. And then you respond to our node with that token, and it says, yep, I found this, and I know who you are, and so it returns to you like an upgraded session, and you're allowed to connect under. It then knows the domain you're connected under, so it knows what you're allowed to access and who you're allowed to talk to.
So is that token, or is your user ID passcode in the app that you're the Ionic app?
So in this Ionic app,
Or you're doing anonymous?
I was doing anonymous login. So in this Ionic app, you I call this login function. If you set up, so when you attach this little auth appliance up here, it's I think it says, yeah, it's at auth level 0. If I destroy it and went to reattach it, you can choose to create one that requires a persistent name, password, and email address, so that when your users of your app go to log on, they have to put in a name, email. And something we got to on our own version, but not for injected applications for developers, is obviously doing OAuth authorization for users and stuff, but something that if anybody wants to fork some repos and add some stuff, feel free, because that would be a cool addition to this. But yeah, for this app I just did anonymous login. So if you know the name of where to find my appliance and auth appliance, you can connect as a user and access the API which is just this subscribe function and publish function. So you could mess with my chat app, but I wasn't particularly concerned about security for this purpose. But
In terms of the type safety stuff, where your function isn't called if it doesn't, if you're not passing the right parameters, that's on the back end, is that, and then you've got like support for Node and Swift and stuff. What are the types that are available? Is it different per backend language, or is it all based on JavaScript?
Yeah, that was actually an interesting part of it, because it's actually all being done. It's actually all being done in our client-side libraries, and what we did was we made. So we wrote. It turns out you can like Golang, like you can compile it pretty much into any other language, including JavaScript. So we wrote this core that does. I have a lot of like vanilla JavaScript libraries that are wrapped around it that do more specific stuff. We wrote this core that does the type checking and stuff for every language in Go, and then it converts into these .sos or somebody wrote something that'll convert it into native JavaScript. I mean, it's a mess. It's ugly minified, but and then in there, what we do is basically we're kind of type checking JSON. So it supports your basic types of string, your primitives. It can't really distinguish, because some languages don't have a notion, like JavaScript doesn't, everything's kind of a float. So in JavaScript, in Python you could say I want a float versus an int. JavaScript, if you say one or the other, it doesn't really matter, because you're just going to get a number, yeah. So it's good in that aspect, and then it takes, you can create an object with a key, and say what that, so you can have, this object should have this key name as well as this type value. And an array, you could have an array of strings or array of, so it does the primitive types. I think we did get nested objects working. And actually one of the cool things that we were able to do a little bit too is like reconstruction of objects and their prototypes. So like in JavaScript I might have an example on this tour page. Yeah, so I think over here, so you can, it's maybe hard to see, but you can create oh, this is just a Python example. I guess I didn't have the JS running. Oh, the JS is up here. But you can kind of create your own constructor and pass that into our function, which is like we call it a model object. And as long as you name the keys of what they should be, like this.name should be a string number. If you say I'm expecting a student across the wire, as long as you get an object that has those keys, it will reconstruct it, and it will also give you the class functions, like the toString and everything. So you instantly, inside your function that you got called, will have guaranteed to have the right keys and the prototype. Yeah.
So it seems like you guys aren't trying to make money anymore, but what would you say the main selling points are over Firebase or Parse or like AWS Mobile Hub?
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely hard to sell. I mean, personally, we did some like, what are they called? I think they're called like white papers, where we could compare like the amount of code that it takes to write the same application. Like we redid some apps from like Firebase and some other places, and we compared some of the latency times too. And our latency was a little worse than Firebase, but not like in a matter of like 50 milliseconds or something. But our code, like we're able to do things in like every app I've written. If it takes a little bit of understanding and like figuring out what's going on, which I think is the hardest selling point of like getting people to say like, what is this thing, and like how do I possibly use it and why? But once you kind of as, like from a guy who's been building it for 8 months, I know how to use it, so I can write. I feel like I can write things faster and less code, and I think the other thing that I really like is just all the built-in like bidirectional communication. I like to not have to pull my backend over and over and over. If I want to like see something update live on the screen, it can just send out a notification. Anybody who's online right now gets it, and instantly your screen's refreshed. and I like the built-in kind of authorization for my functions. So when I register, when I'm writing a backend function, an API function, I don't have to put all that boilerplate code that says it's got to be a person with this permission, and I only expect these types of arguments, and you can kind of build all that in, which again I guess is the argument for less code, and maybe cleaner looking code in the end, is the idea. That's the argument I would make for it.
So one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Are you guys still actively developing it, or is this more you're just trying to push it open source completely?
I think right now we're just transitioning more into an open source. Like we're still maybe actively polishing a few things. We want to do some restructuring so that it's easy for people to. Because right now you have to interact with our web UI, which is pretty handy, but we also want to make it so that going forward, if our web UI is not there, people can easily run it locally or deploy it to. Ideally, what we're thinking about is packaging the node and all the services up in such a way where you could attach a node container if you wanted, any of the services you might want, and your own back-end code, and then just deploy that all in one kind of bundle on AWS or run it locally or however you wanted to do it. It's kind of I think, where we're moving to right now.
Yeah, I know, like, for parse, it's kind of similar, obviously, that they're
Yeah.
trying to go open source, but
Yeah.
that could be a direction if you guys, like now they've basically given people strategies of moving to AWS or something, you guys were going towards it, just write a tutorial on how to get running on AWS or whatever.
Yeah, I think we're going to put out some material on explaining some of that stuff and try to.
Are you guys on GitHub?
Yeah, we are. So our organization is Exis.io here. So GitHub/Exis.io. Our repos, the website's private, and the core appliances are, but we're open sourcing those. The rest of this stuff is pretty much all open source, so you can look at it. There's a bunch of tutorials, a bunch of our JS repo is our JavaScript library, so you can look in there and see some of the stuff I wrote for, depending on whether you're running a node in the browser, and that's where all our JS files are. Feel free to hop in there and contribute pull requests, file issues.
And you don't have your fork of Wapin here?
We do. We just call it node. So here, this is our fork of the WAMP node. They have several of their own, like written in Python, Go, a whole other one. I mean, that people have done. They're not necessarily their own, just based on this. And this is our more, tailored to our specific needs. So it's got a lot of stuff that we added on top of it that goes away. But yeah, that's an open source repo in there too. So if you want to look at how to mess with that, it's in there as well.
So you mentioned that root node, I guess, was Exis, and then .NIC too. If I was to run the system myself on my own system, I'd be whatever I want at the top, right?
Yeah.
And so effectively, I could do something like that with just once you've got it fully open source.
Yeah, you can do that right now with just the node, and you can run the node locally, and you can turn off. We have a tool, but it's actually in the core appliance. It's one that's like a administrative tool to help you run the node with the proper permissions. I don't know if there's documentation on how to run it, but you would have to set some environment variables to tell it to because right now I think by default it tries to attach to our auth appliance, which we haven't open sourced yet. So by default out of the gate, when you ran it, you would be kind of more back to the primitive type WAMP version where you wouldn't have authorization built in and stuff. Once we get it running once we get the appliances released and packaged, then you'll be able to run it just like we do. And yeah, you can MadJS could be the root and down the chain however you want it to run it.
And when you say appliance, would you effectively say it's a container, Docker container for appliance?
Yeah, that's how we're running it right now. Is we have 7, I want to say, what we call like core or top level appliances. Like we have a top level authorization appliance, although we also have a version of that so we create a new container for each of your apps too, and we deploy that on ECS so for each of those like appliances I showed you, every user gets a container of each of those, and then those are all injected like attached to your domain name. Like if you look, they're running connected to the fabric as, I have to find myself. So like my appliance container is, connected as exis.demo.chat container. If I had another app that had the container, it'd be exis.demo.nic2.another app.container. And these are all literally instances of Docker containers. And then we have the top level Docker containers, just 7 of those running. So if you ran your own node, you might not need to, like you could also run your own node that was like the instance of the app itself and not intend it to be used for the way we're using it for like develop, you know what I mean? Like you just run your node as your app rather than run a node that also allows sub-users to run apps on it, in which case you wouldn't need to inject lots of containers.
Sorry, one more question.
Okay.
That container running that domain, what if you need to scale it up?
So it depends on. That's a good question. One that we maybe didn't fully solve. You can run. So it's this logger container, right? If I wanted to, I could create another container from it. The only issue here is that I need to name it something different, which means it lives at a different endpoint. So it doesn't necessarily scale that way. And if I was able to name it the same thing, if it used registrations, they would clash with each other. So that's hard. One of the big problems that we never got around to solving completely, which would be good to solve, is when we've had a lot of thoughts on how to do it, was just a huge engineering task would be to allow like what we call like a multi-node, because that's something like it requires so you can have more than one node and allow multiple registrations, and essentially right now the node runs in its own EC2 instance with its own memory, and you basically need a shared like Redis implementation of where all the session data and stuff is stored, and then routing would change, and so it's kind of a big problem that we never fully got solved. But yeah, so right now the answer is it doesn't work great. You can't scale your local containers amazingly. Yeah.
Can you talk about and show the Swift support?
So I don't have, personally not a Swift developer, but so we have these little boxes they're kind of cool. Call them REPL boxes. So they actually legitimately, for JS actually, because for some reason when we tried to run these Node.js instances in the container, it took up like 250 megs of memory every time you launched one, and so it just wasn't looking scalable. So I actually run the JS stuff in the browser, but for Python and Swift, obviously I can't do that. So we launch it off to a Docker repler, which like converts code to a file, has all the libraries expected there, and then actually runs it. Moral of the story being, last time I'm not sure the Swift one was running, but this I guess is the Swift. I don't know Swift code that well, but this is kind of as much as I can show you about the Swift version of it. But this is a Swift version of registering a function that wants, I guess, integers, and then hopefully, if we're lucky, when I call it. Oh.
Yeah, you were passing in strings.
I was passing a string, so that's good. So I got a invalid argument. So if it wants an int, Yeah, I saw this last time. So, unfortunately, the core is not supposed to dump, but yeah. So, I guess I can't show you too much of the Swift implementation right now, but it. I don't know. That's not, unfortunately. I work on the JS libraries, so not my fault. But I know I've seen it work. I've seen apps built off it. We have some tutorials. If you want to explore a little bit, I direct you to the big sidebar that gets way too long over here. In the little tutorial section, Vionic, Swift, Droid, which is really experimental, I would say. But there's a number of these Swift chat apps that you can kind of go through and see.
You need Xcode.
Yeah, I think you need Xcode to run Swift, so. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I was gonna, so just help me understand this more. So if you attach a Docker instance here, roughly speaking, that's gotta have some kind of interface, it's gotta like maybe a register function, or it's gotta participate in your protocols, right?
Docker?
No, whatever's on the Docker instance.
Yeah. So, so the one I did, right, is, let's see, I think I lost this little Exis chat backend that I made somewhere. Yeah. So this is just a super little Node.js backend. So basically, to run it on our system, you include the package.json, which tells it what dependency it has. In this case, it just needs our JS riffle lib. You tell it this is where you specify that your base image is the Exis Node.js image, and the command you want to run to start is Node.js server.js, and then the code itself is in this server.js file. And in here, what you can see is that I create. It's kind of hard to read. I get my domain from my environment because when I'm plopped in the container, the system gives me that, and then I kind of create a app domain by splitting off the pieces that I know exist, which is the domain for the chat app that I'm going to call, and then this onJoin function. Anything. This is kind of like your run loop. So that's like what it's going to happen when you join. Down here I do the server.join, so when I connect to the fabric, if I'm authenticated, in this case, in my Docker container I have an environment variable that's set with my tokens, so that's what will be used for authentication. In my app I did a login, so down here I just call join and it knows to grab my credentials from my environment, and then this is, like I said, kind of my run loop. And so when I come in, I subscribe for messages on the Exis.jet channel. You can imagine if it was an API, you would register functions. So you would register, create user, and you'd have your create user function that you'd register to that, or register delete user, register your whole API. It would be a list of registrations, kind of like similar to an HTTP server, just a little different language. In this case, I subscribed to that channel to receive the events, and then all I did was log them in on our web UI. I had that little. I showed you the container has the logs for its output, so you can kind of get an idea of what's going on with it. So that's the idea of like the containers, is especially your own containers, is that they're gonna. And right now, the way we had it set up, although we were looking to change it, you couldn't really run an HTTP server because we run it on a variety of EC2 instances, and most of them don't have a static IP, so you would have a hard time getting your traffic that you were looking for. But the support for that wouldn't be hard to add if you had a static IP. You could have a mix of an HTTP server mixed with this as well, if you just wanted certain, like the publish subscribe capabilities, or certain aspects of it. You certainly wouldn't have to convert your whole API to use this system. You could run an HTTP server traditional is, and then if you wanted to get push notifications, even just to push someone to say like go pull this HTTP endpoint or something, could be an easy way of doing that. So.
So your demo was a peer-to-peer chat communications, no persistence of that chat. If you refreshed one of the UIs, you lose the state.
In this one, yeah, so if I refresh, then, yeah, all my message history is gone. I'll still get messages from this person. Well, ideally I would. Oh, I deleted the auth plans, so this is broken now. But I would have gotten messages had I not broken the app. But yeah, you refresh and you lose the state. So the one service we built to kind of to help with that, so if you're offline or if you refresh and lose your messages, is this replay appliance here, which essentially the API for that is that you tell it to listen on the channel for messages, and then it just takes those messages, records the time, records the message, the JSON, stores it in a MongoDB, and then when you connect later, you say, give me all the messages. You can say the last 100 or from this time, there's a bunch of querying options, but you then could, so you can imagine if you wanted to build a slightly more realistic chat app that had history, your replay would be logging those. And when you pull down to refresh, it would say like, give me the last 100 before this timestamp, and then you could pop those all up. And if you wanted to go back further in your history, like you expect from a normal chat app. So, and there's obviously other purposes you could use for replaying those messages if people miss notifications when they're offline. It is like a push notification system, but if you're running on iOS or Android, it's not going to, when your app's in the background, it's not going to I think the WebSocket connection is going to get broken, so you're not going to be able to send push notifications. You're still going to have to go through the regular channels that Android and iOS set up for their push notification system. So you're going to miss messages if you're offline or if your app's in the background or something. Yeah.
So the replay is more for just messages, whereas the storage part is more for I want to persist this over time and not just rebroadcast it.
Yeah. So the storage is a full-on MongoDB. So I don't know if you're too familiar with Mongo, but basically the in the I can show you better in the documentation because I don't have a thing up for it, but storage, yeah. So you get you create an instance, tell it where your storage appliance is checked, and then with that riffle library, you get riffle.list collections, and then you get this whole API here of, and you'd probably use this on your back end because you generally don't want your front end users directly accessing your database, but you can create an index, delete many, you can create multiple collections in your database. So you get one MongoDB database with as many collections as you want, and then you get all the functions that kind of go with the collection operators. So for indexing and yeah, you can drop it if you want, do anything you want with it. So, and that's kind of the whole API is listed and documented here. But that's the difference between replay is just kind of really a lightweight, you don't have any control over what you're storing. It stores the messages as is for you. And in Mongo, you pass in, if you define a user collection to have a name, email, whatever characteristics you want in subnested arrays, and if you want to put a geo index on it or something, you can do all of that. It's like a fully customizable MongoDB. Yeah.
It looks like you guys have worked very hard on this. Spent a lot of time on it.
Yeah.
What's kind of your reasoning for, pushing it open source and trying to scale it down?
Well, we're a pretty small team.
How many?
So I would say, technically we have 4 full-time developers, although one of them was our CEO, who is never around. He's like off in San Francisco trying to convince people to fund us. So we really have 3 full-time developers, and then a handful of people like who can, from the university, like undergrads and other people who come and kind of work when they can, whatever. And I think the scope of the project has just ballooned to, and we're all, I think if we would have picked maybe a particular language or picked a little more focus, and not let the scope blow up so broadly, it could have been a little easier to maintain. But at this point, I'm like maintaining and documenting the entire JavaScript script. There's another guy doing Swift and another guy doing Python, and then there's the whole infrastructure that needs to get maintained, and it's like it's hard, it's a lot, and I think the scope got a little too big, and we don't have the funding to hire on more people, so it's I think sort of a best option is to hope, we can convince people that it's cool, useful. I like it. I hope to keep putzing around with my time and stuff. So I think that was the thinking there.
Have people been building stuff with it? I mean,
so we have something like 560 users. Some of them have been building. Yeah, a lot of them I've had to help hands-on build stuff. A lot of it has been. I actually did like a meetup at Ionic a little a month or 2 ago, and they did a blog post for us, which was awesome, and that got us actually a lot of traffic because they got a pretty nice open source community, and so a lot of it has been, which is why I've focused a lot of my time actually on Ionic and Angular, has been a lot of people building stuff on that, and we've had the UW Badger Loop, they're called. They're like the Hyperloop team for the UW. They use our node, so they do like the what is it, the rover for Mars or whatever, the SpaceX competition. They had to they use our node to do all the publishing from all the sensors to publish to their web interface, and then they built an app for that, which is actually released on Android and iOS. I think it's just called the Badger Loop app and stuff, and so that actually uses our system as well. That's probably the only thing we have that's been released as far as the app stores go. But we've definitely had people tinkering around and toying with it and working on building some of their own backends. Fortunately, not as 500 some people is not super attractive to anybody who's trying to be willing to give you money to continue on. So, but yeah, we have had people do it, and I've been building stuff and tinkering around on my own, and we'd love people to continue and to add to it. So,
can you briefly talk about this sponsorship from the UW comp side, under who, which professor you guys work, and if the comp side didn't sponsor the project to start, how did you get started?
Well, so some of the team was working on, it's the project that Leo's working on now, which is Paradrop, which is, it's like an edge computing Wi-Fi router, so it's a kind of a smart-enabled Wi-Fi router which you can run applications on, and we were running applications on it in Docker, and you can imagine, we ran into the issue of how do you build this web interface and allow people to communicate with the, authenticated communicate with these instances of their routers everywhere, and if they have distributed routers, how do you allow developers to create their applications and launch them? And so as we discovered this WAMP protocol that then we started using for our system, and then I think some people had been working on that project for years and were interested in moving on, and somebody had the idea of wait, what if we did this whole other thing with this? And so from there we just kind of shifted gears one day completely and spun off. So
the routers you talk about are just commercial, residential routers, or what kind of routers you're talking about?
Yeah, they're just wireless Wi-Fi routers, access points.
Linksys?
Yeah, well, they're not exactly because they have to have hardware in them, but
They run Snappy.
yeah.
Switch from OpenWRT.
Yeah. So they're a little beefed up. But sweet. Looks like there's pizza. So
I'll let everybody know what we're doing next month, if it's Node School or a presentation, depends on how to hear back. But yeah, let's.
Thanks for the pizza.
Thank you.